and the PFL heads over to Universal Studios in Orlando, Florida for the first round of their World Tournament. And as always, the Ground and Pound podcast has got you covered. If you enjoy the PFL, if you're new to the PFL, the Ground and Pound podcast is looking to do a full card breakdown every single event. So hit that like and subscribe button if you enjoy the PFL. And without further ado, we're going to head off into the prelims. We're going to get to the main event. I'm going to give you my breakdown and full analysis of each individual fight, talking to you a little about the betting lines. And like I mentioned before, and like I said, the PFL, if it's new to you, this format is a little bit different to the UFC. It's more of a bracket style. Win and you advance style, and yes, it's something a little bit different to MMA. They do have the smart cage as well, and I'm a big fan of the PFL. I think they have a good product, but my only complaint is sometimes that the fights drop out and some people have to step in, so you get some pretty crazy mismatches, some very, very big favorites, especially on the betting lines. But without further ado, let's get right into the picks. Let's get right into the action. So kicking off the prelims, we have Joseph Luciano taking on Sheilds, and this is very short notice for Sheilds. Sheilds is coming in on a couple of days' notice, fighting out of the States, and from what I could see of him on the regional scene, 6-2 record, but not necessarily fought the best level of competition. Very, very short notice for him. Joseph was meant to actually fight Thad Jean, who we'll actually see later on this card. So big change in opponent, big stylistic matchup change for sure. And when I watch tape on Sheilds, he's very much a stocky wrestler. He likes to come out very aggressive in round one. He looks to get the takedown early in most of his fights, and he has nice front chokes and a good ability to get his opponent to the ground. Now, the difference here, I think, is that obviously on short notice, I think that's going to be a big problem, simply because if he comes out very aggressive in round one, very stocky build, and he's not able to get Luciano down, it's going to be, I think he's probably going to gas. He's going to be live early. I think that he's definitely aggressive. He definitely looks for takedowns. He definitely knows what his game plan is in fights, but I don't necessarily think that he's going to be able to implement that game plan against a guy like Joseph Luciano. Joseph Luciano, he's fairly impressive. He hasn't necessarily fought a crazy level of competition, but 9-2, 9-1, I believe it says on Tapology, but that one lone loss is to Jonathan Mukhamed. Jonathan Mukhamed just fought not that long ago in the UFC and was able to actually beat Kevin Jousset. He actually looked pretty decent in that fight, to be fair. So the loss that he's got isn't necessarily against the worst level of competition. And what I noticed about the way that Joseph likes to fight is fairly solid Muay Thai, hits fairly hard on the feet, excellent takedown defense, which I think is going to come in handy here against Sheilds. And ultimately, I think that the short notice for Sheilds is just going to be too much for him. I think that Luciano's probably going to be able to defend the takedowns early. He talked about weathering a storm in his last fight. I think that's what he's got to do here. Defend the takedowns, keep it on the feet. I think he'll have success. And don't get me wrong, Sheilds is going to be somebody that's going to be live in the first round. But I think once it gets to the second, the third, I think that the short notice is going to be a factor here. And I think Luciano's going to have his way here on the feet. I think if he does get tired, I think he can even implement some grappling as well. And even though he is a little bit flat-footed on the feet, he tends to throw with a lot of power. He likes to go to the body. He likes to rip to the legs. So, yeah, I like Joseph here. I think he gets it done. I feel fairly confident in him, especially with the short notice change of opponent. And next up, we have Nathan Kelly taking on Kim. And the thing I really noticed here is people have been fairly high on Nathan Kelly. He fights out of SBG Island, and to me, personally, I kind of question his record. In his last fight, I did actually pick him in previous. He fought a Dagestani, I forget the name of the individual, but he came out very aggressive. He was able to land a decent elbow, and he's always been known to be somewhat of a finisher. He can get it done on the ground. He can get it done on the feet. I haven't really necessarily seen him fight and beat the best level of competition. It appears to me that when he's able to get the win, it's because he's fighting a much lesser opponent. Whereas when he tends to come into some adversity, some decent level competition, he seems to struggle. So I don't really necessarily think that he's going to do very well in this matchup. And Kim, even though he's making his PFL debut here, he's fought over in Brave, which is a fairly decent organization, especially on the regional scene. He's been fighting against some undefeated Russians, some very tough level competition. And the thing I really liked about him was when I see him getting taken down, he has a really dangerous guard. He looks to sweep. He has good cardio. I haven't seen too much in the way of his striking. It looks very basic, very fundamental, but he has a dangerous guard and he has decent cardio. And some of the fighters that he's fought, I've seen on the regional scene, he fought a particularly tough 12-0 Chechen fighter, and that individual trained with Hamzat, and he looked fairly decent. He was able to weather a storm against him, was able to sweep, take his back, and was able to choke him out. So fairly impressive, honestly, on the ground. And I think he can hang here with Kelly. And Kim's actually fought as high up as lightweight at 155. And I don't believe that the PFL actually has a 155 division. So it'll be interesting to see if he makes weight here and how he looks on the scale coming down. But if he's prepared, if he's ready to go and he's ready to make weight, I think he can have success here against Kelly. And I think this is I don't necessarily think it's do or die for Kelly, but I do think that this will show where he's at and whether he's more of a can crusher than people believe he is. And I've never been that high on Kelly. I'm going to pick Kim, but I'm not super confident, obviously, because Kim isn't that tested so far within the PFL. But you have to think that if he's fighting tough Russians on the regional scene, and he even had a title fight in Brave in his last fight, which he lost by split decision. So you have to think that he's going to be prepared for a guy like Nathan Kelly over in the PFL. But not super confident. Again, I would wait until we see what he looks like on the scales before placing any wagers on this one. But I think this one probably goes longer as well. I don't think Kelly's going to have that much success with Kim on the ground. I think it's mostly going to be stand-up. And to be honest with you, both guys are pretty basic in the stand-up. So I think this one goes longer. I think I'm going to take Kim here in this matchup to get it done over Kelly. And next up, we have the names that I'm going to struggle to pronounce. We have Giannis Bachar taking on Masayuki Kikuiri. And we have the Japanese fighter. We'll talk a little bit about him first. And PFL debut for him, but he did fight over on the Bellator Challenge Series. Very, very measured on the feet. I really like his approach. He kind of leaves no openings, but he also doesn't take a whole lot of risks. So his fights can kind of be reliant upon one big moment or one big explosion. One of the things I did like about him, which I wrote in my notes, was he really likes to go for takedowns in the last minute to 30 seconds to seal rounds or win rounds. So if rounds are very close, he'll go for that takedown. He'll look to implement his wrestling at the end of rounds to try to score, at least in the judges' eyes, that he's won that round. So I do like that in his fighting style. And he has a good fight IQ. Like I said, he doesn't fight crazy. He doesn't fight wild. He fights very much within himself. Excuse me. And like I said, he's very sort of basic. If you ever play 2K, he's like a very much an average player. He doesn't stand out in anything. He's just kind of average across the board. And that's kind of how I would view him as a fighter. And you have to think that the experience he's got in the Challenger Series is going to pay off here, and that the lights of the PFL aren't going to be too big for him. And Giannis, first of all, what I noticed, obviously, he's fought over in Cage Warriors. Now, to me, I don't necessarily rate Cage Warriors too much as a high-level promotion. I'm looking more at Brave, LFA, things like that as a higher level regional scene promotion. And Giannis didn't necessarily stand out to me too much. But one thing I did notice is he loves to pressure on the feet. He likes to walk his guys down, walk his opponents down. And in the striking, he looks fairly crisp. And when he was on The Ultimate Fighter, he did get knocked out within 20 seconds against Rob Valentine, who we're going to see this Saturday, funny enough, over on the Apex card. And I don't necessarily think that that's a bad loss. Valentine did go very far in The Ultimate Fighter. I do think Valentine is a UFC level prospect. And I was kind of sort of torn in this matchup as to who to go to, who can I rely on? One guy kind of fights and very technical. One guy will pressure heavily. And then I came across doing some research and I found out that Giannis has actually been training with Khabib and his team. I don't know how long for. I couldn't tell you, how long he's actually been over in Dagestan in Russia training with them, wrestling. He's been training with Islam, all of the crew. But I found that video it said something had been posted maybe about 3 weeks ago. So maybe he's done this camp, fully with Khabib and his crew. Obviously, other Russian fighters from Dagestan are on this card that we'll talk about later on, that Khabib will most likely, if not, have trained or be in the corner for. So there is potential here that that's kind of a surprise for a few people. And Giannis is actually the underdog in this matchup. And I'm actually going to pick him here. I think that that's going to be the deciding factor for me. I think that he's learned a lot after being on The Ultimate Fighter. I think that he's obviously going to take the loss. He appeared to take the loss anyway, very difficult and very hard. And I think that maybe he's, said, hey, I need to get with the right guys, and Khabib and his team are definitely the right guys to go to. So, yeah, I'm going to go with Giannis here, or I'm not sure if it's Giannis, but I'm going to go with the Greek fighter here to get it done. I think he can implement wrestling, obviously, who's been working on that. I like his stand-up. It always looked fairly solid to me, even on tape study before I knew he was training with Khabib. I'm going to get it done here, and I like him fairly, especially as an underdog. I like him in this matchup. I think if this was a pick'em, I'd probably think differently, but I definitely think there's value in Giannis here to get it done, especially if he's been training with Khabib and his team. And that brings us to one fight that's been really difficult to study. We have Gabriel Braga taking on Fred Dupras. This one's been difficult for many reasons, but I hope you guys appreciate the research. But basically, Dupras, or Fred, he was basically meant to fight on the early prelims in the very first fight against a different fighter. And according to the PFL website, Braga and Fred are supposed to fight. Now, when you check Tapology, it says that they have their original opponent. So I'm not really too sure what's going on there. I've gone off of what the PFL website saying is their fighters and their organization. But usually Tapology is a lot better at keeping up to date with who's fighting and who's not. So we're going to go with this matchup. Gabriel Braga, very, very technical on the feet. Not necessarily somebody that likes to throw a whole lot of volume. I've been fairly impressed with him, and the thing that I really like about him, and it's going to be the key factor in this matchup, is excellent takedown defense. He's really, really tough to take down and hold down. If you do get him down, he's fairly successful in being able to get right back up to his feet. And he's fought really, really high-level guys in the PFL. He's done a fantastic job of being able to be dangerous on the feet and finish opponents, but he's also proven he has 5-round cardio and decent, respectable cardio. And that might be down to the fact that he has less volume. But in this matchup, it's really just going to come down to sprawl and brawl. Fred is basically submission or bust. That is basically his game plan. He loves to find submissions. He looks for chokes, DAS chokes, front chokes, guillotines. Anything he can really get his hands on. He's very much submission or bust, and he doesn't necessarily have the wrestling to get fights to the ground. He really just looks for the opportunity to snatch up a neck or snatch up a submission. And like I mentioned about Braga, his ability to keep fights on the feet, his ability to have submission defense, I think is his great quality. And the difference I see with Fred is if he can't get that submission, things don't go his way in fights when he's unable to implement his grappling. And I think Braga's going to be a tough out for him. And I checked before the video. I was hoping maybe to get some odds on this one. I think Braga is a fantastic parlay leg if he's a decent sized favorite. And for those of you that haven't bet the PFL before, some of the odds will get a little chalky. They will get pretty big, but I think Braga's very safe here. I think he gets it done. I think maybe double method KO decision would be a good way to go. I probably think Braga's going to get it done on the feet. I probably think he finds the KO here on Fred just purely because Braga's takedown defense will be too much. The striking will be too much. And I think the change of opponents really kind of screwed Fred over because he was supposed to fight a guy who was more on his level, and I think Braga is definitely levels above. So, yeah, going with Gabriel Braga here. I feel fairly confident in this one. And like I said, I think it's a good parlay leg definitely to throw in for the bets this week, Thursday coming up. And next up, we have one of my favorite fighters, and Thad Jean. Thad Jean is a fantastic fighter, and he's taking on Magomed Berkhamov, I believe it is. Honestly, I kind of feel like Magomed is kind of a fraud. I've not necessarily seen enough from him that I'm necessarily convinced, but he went to a split decision in his last fight against Ray Cooper III, and Ray Cooper III is, I know I don't like doing MMA math, but Ray Cooper III is an older guy, shorter guy for the weight class. He came in overweight, I believe, in that fight. And the thing with Magomed is he has 17-2 on his record, but when you go through, it looks very padded. He has very long breaks in between fights, and he looks respectable on the feet. You know, he does kind of leave his chin a little bit high. I think the real test here for Thad Jean is, Thad Jean striking is fantastic, but we've not seen anybody necessarily implement a grappling game plan here. So that's kind of what's got me a little bit shook on this matchup. And the thing with the striking here is Thad Jean is going to be the more athletic guy, the faster hands, the more power on the feet. I think out of the two, he's going to be much stronger. Magomed obviously can implement a heavy game plan of wrestling, and I think that he could have success if he is able to get the fight to the ground. 17-2 Russians, you know how they like to go. You know, if it goes on the feet, they can bang on the feet, but they sometimes look for the takedown. But what I noticed when I was looking at his footage is most of the time he's looking to strike. He's very much a kickboxer more than a grappler and a wrestler. So I think that's going to play right into Gene's hands, and being the faster, more athletic individual here, I think that's going to suit him nicely. And I just kind of question him leaving his chin up when he leaves the pocket in exchanges, because Thad Gene, with a 3-inch reach advantage and athleticism and speed, I think he can definitely catch Magomed early. And when I kind of first looked at this matchup, I thought, oh no, you know, Thad Gene's got a real test on his hands here, and maybe the prospect kind of struggles. But I think it's very easy to look at the records and kind of be like intimidated here. But I honestly don't believe that Magomed is the typical style Russian that we're used to seeing. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of those guys later on the card. But I think Thad Gene here gets it done. I think that this is a nice test for him. It's a nice step up. And like I mentioned earlier, that Thad Gene was supposed to fight a different opponent in Luciano. And this is a big step up for him. I'm sure it's one that he's looking forward to. And I think he gets it done, honestly. I've been impressed with him. I think he's very marketable. I think he's one of the PFL. I almost said UFC. I think it's one of the PFL's main guys who they like to promote. And I like this matchup for him. I think he gets it done. Not crazy confident. Definitely going to bet him this week because I do think that he will win, but not my top ticket, that's for sure. Yeah, I like Thad Gene in this one. Medium confidence. And next up, we have Jeremy Kennedy taking on Movlid Khaybulaev. Again, very, very difficult name to pronounce, but one name that does stand out when I look through Movlid's record is Khabib Nurmagomedov, and that's his main coach, that's his training partner, that's who he trains with most of the time. And 21-0 Dagestani Russian, so you know exactly what you're going to get from him. And you have to think that that's going to be enough to get it done here against Jeremy Kennedy. And Jeremy Kennedy trains out of Extreme Couture, so obviously a respectable gym. I'm sure they're going to have him prepared for the Dagestani wrestling of Movlid, and you have to think that it's not really going to be enough. I don't necessarily think that his takedown defense is the best. I think that his wide stance, he likes to leave his front leg very open, and I think that's going to leave a single leg there for Movlid to take the single leg, get that takedown, and ground and pound and control. We tend to see with Movlid that he likes to go to, well, I say he likes to go to decision, but he tends to have that grinding style. So a lot of his fights do go to decisions, not necessarily a finisher. I wouldn't be surprised if he's able to get a finish on the ground here with ground and pound, but ultimately I think he looks to Dagestani handcuff his opponents, you know, take them down, control them, beat them up, wear them out. And it's kind of just that rinse and repeat style that we're very familiar with. And he's a big favorite on this card, and rightfully so. I think that he'll get it done here. I feel very confident to put him in parlays. The thing I noticed as well with Jeremy Kennedy is that when he does like to fight and mix it up, he is looking to mostly strike, but he stays very within himself. But he just leaves that leg open for the Russians to, you know, go for those takedowns. And he just so happens to be fighting a 21-0 Russian Dagestani wrestler here. So it's very much a 1 + 1 = 2 sort of breakdown from me, but it's pretty much how I see the fight go, and I feel very confident in the Dagestani guy to get it done. And even though he is 34, you have to believe that, you know, that grappling style and that heavy pressure style isn't going to necessarily go anywhere at the age of 34. So I do like the Dag to get it done here in a confident fashion. And next up, we have two of the bigger names over in the PFL. We have Magomed Umalatov taking on Logan Storley. And this matchup, when I first looked at it, I was kind of a little bit concerned for the Russian. Logan Storley, if you're not familiar, four-time All-American wrestler out of Division I. His combined record in wrestling is 119-27, so very prolific wrestling career. The guy, like I said, is a four-time All-American, so you know exactly what you're going to get. Heavy wrestling, heavy pressure. He likes to throw the overhand and use his strikes to set up his takedowns, and he's always looking to get you to the ground. Only 5'9" though for welterweight, which is pretty undersized, very short and stocky for the division. But the thing that I noticed with him in his fights is if he can't get you to the ground and you're able to throw uppercuts, you're able to keep him at bay and land strikes on the feet, he doesn't necessarily tend to do a whole lot of damage if he doesn't get the takedowns. If you can sprawl and brawl and keep fights on the feet, he won't really have too much of an answer for you because he is looking to pretty much wrestle. And when he's fought opponents that have been able to keep, you know, him off of their hips and keep it standing, he's had a lot of difficulty. And you have to think as well with the size and the reach advantage at welterweight that some of these guys are going to have, especially Umalatov in this matchup, that he's going to be able to pepper him with the jab and land straight shots. And the thing I really like about Umalatov is I think he was kind of a little bit, I don't want to say fraud-checked in his last fight when he fought against Shamil. Shamil went on to win the Grand Prix, I believe it was, the PFL final, and become champion. But Shamil is also, I believe he's 20-0 or 20-1. So the guy showed impressive skills throughout the whole tournament, beating multiple Russians and multiple undefeated Russians, including Umalatov. And I look at it like this. Umalatov fights at American Top Team. And he is a respectable size favorite in this matchup. And you have to think American Top Team is the place to go when he's always fought there, always trained there. But you have to think that that's a good camp for him in order to bounce back. They know the game plan from Logan Storley here. They're going to be able to prepare him to, defensively wrestle against Storley to keep it on the feet. And one thing about Umalatov that he's always had is he's always had dynamite in his hands. The PFL does a great job of being able to show some of his highlights of all of his knockouts leading up to his final appearance against Shamil. And I was fairly impressed with his stand-up. And I do think that, this is a much higher level of competition he's fought recently. Neiman Gracie, I believe he fought before he got into the final against Shamil, and now Logan Storley. But I think he's going to be ready for Storley. He knows what the game plan is coming in. He knows to keep the fight on the feet. I think the height, the size, the reach, I think it's all going to play a big factor here against Storley. And I just think that in 2025, I think that one-dimensional MMA fighters are just going to have very little success. If you can basically stop plan A, there is no plan B. And for Umalatov, I think he keeps it on the feet. I think he boxes him up, and I think he just does more damage. And I wouldn't be surprised if Storley does get a takedown. I just don't think that he's going to be able to win entire rounds just solely with one or two takedowns. So going with Umalatov, I feel fairly good about him to bounce back in the picks and in the bets. And next up, that brings us all the way to the co-main event, and we have Jesus Pinedo taking on Adam Borics. And I got to say, I'm pretty impressed with Adam Borics. Adam Borics is someone I've been keeping my eye on over in the PFL. He's got really, really slick striking, 31 years old in his prime. He really, really likes the knee up the middle, which is one of his main weapons. He likes elbows in the clinch. Fantastic volume. He can really, really push a pace. He has 5-round cardio, solid takedown defense. And the way that I would describe his striking style is when you see coaches talk a lot about just touch your opponent. Don't throw everything into your punches. Just touch, just touch. That's what he's doing the whole time. And he demonstrated that very well against Matt Brunel, I believe it was, Mats Brunel. He's just constantly touching. He's throwing 70% in every single shot that he's throwing. And he loves to time that knee up the middle. He'll throw flying knees. He's a very exciting fighter. And I definitely think this is actually going to be fight of the night. I think this is my banger. This is the one I think that's going to be a very good fight for the fans, for the neutrals. And Jesus Pinedo, he was able to, I believe it was in 2023, he was able to win the $1 million and become the champion when he knocked out Brandon Loughnane in the final with a very decisive knee, which shocked a lot of people because Brandon Loughnane was a huge favorite in that fight. Jesus Pinedo was able to land that and win the $1 million, so hats off to him. And he's able to, he trains over with Kevin Voorhaas, who's in the UFC, who we just saw beat Lazy Boy at the weekend. He trains over there with Barzola, Enrique Barzola, who is also a former Bellator fighter. So decent training partners to be with and train with. But my biggest issue here is after doing a little bit of deep diving, I noticed that Jesus hadn't actually fought since 2023. So I did a little bit of research, and it turns out that he dislocated part of his back, and that's the reason he hasn't been fighting. So in the famous words of Mike Tyson, spinal. He's got a spinal injury that he's had for 14 months, I believe it is. So it's a pretty long time he's been inactive. And the thing I noticed as well with him is he's very flat-footed. So when he's striking, he throws a lot of power shots, and he doesn't necessarily do a whole lot of movement. And I think the one fight with Gabriel Braga where he was able to move a lot, I think that was more of a one-off performance because he knew that he had to implement that game plan against Braga. Usually he's more of a sit down on his punches and throw a lot more power shots and big shots up the middle. But I have to question the layoff. I mean, he was already fairly unathletic. He was already a guy who, doesn't necessarily put up a ton of volume. And I think Borchek here, I believe he's going to be the much faster fighter. He's much hungry. He's been much more active. And when I look at the PFL's promo videos that they do for the fighters, the main and the co-main event, when I watch that, Adam Borchek, he's showing, how do I explain it? He's basically showing that he's ready for his moment. He seems like he's building towards something. And you know when a fighter just seems to kind of have everything in the right place. They interviewed his girlfriend, and he seemed to be very close with his wife or his girlfriend in the promo. And he was what I'm basically trying to get at is everything kind of seems to be fitting in place for Adam Borchek right now. And they seem to be trying to market him. And he is the underdog in this matchup. And I'm actually going to pick him here against Jesus Pinedo. And I just think that the layoff and the back dislocation is something that's kind of got me a little bit spooked, especially for him to be a favorite. I think the name rings true to people that he should be the favorite. However, I just think that Adam's pressure, I think that his volume's going to be enough. I think his movement and his speed's going to be enough. And because I just think that his movement and his speed and the way that he fights, I think it's going to be a tough night for Jesus. I think he's going to be able to land many more strikes than him. I don't necessarily think that either guy is going to be able to get a takedown. Both guys got fantastic takedown defense. And I think this one's going to be a banger. And I want to take a shot on the underdog here in Adam Borchek. And he's impressed me in other fights. He's only ever lost to Pitbull, who's obviously just signed to the UFC, which is not a terrible loss. So in the PFL, he's had a lot of success, and I think he continues here. I think he gets another solid name under his belt. And that brings us to the main event. We got there quick, people, and it's Jason Jackson taking on Andrey Koreshkov. And I gotta admit, I think this is a fantastic main event. For those of you that don't know, Jason Jackson, Jamaican heritage, really cool guy. Very down to earth. Seems like a great person, to be honest with you. They do a lot of promos of him. They did a promo of him going back to his hometown in Jamaica and giving the belt to all of the kids that he knew there. And honestly seems like one of the most down to earth people that you'll ever meet. Really cool guy. And with a name like the ass kicking machine, you know exactly what he's down to do. And I like Jackson in this matchup. And that's not a sly on Andrey at all. I think Andrey, to be honest with you, I think that this is a bad matchup for him. The reason being is because Andrey is a world champion in pancration. Now, for those of you that aren't familiar with pancration, it's basically a wrestling and boxing or striking style that mixes the two together. They call it in Athens, Greece, they call it the original MMA. And his wrestling isn't necessarily his bread and butter. It's more, he can get takedowns, but it's not necessarily that Dagestani style of wrestling that control you, grind you out. It's more of I can get takedowns if I need to. I can fight off takedowns if I need to, but mostly I'm looking to strike. And the thing with Andrey that I noticed is he likes to throw a lot of spinning attacks. So he'll throw spinning kicks to the body. He'll throw spinning elbows. He'll like to mix things up on the feet. And I just believe that with Jackson, the main key for him in all of his fights, when I watch tape on him, I watch 3, 4, 5 fights of his, is he needs to be pressuring. He needs to be going forward. If he's going forward, that's going to take away the kicks of Andrey in this fight. And with that just being a solely boxing heavy approach, I think Jackson's going to have a lot of success here. And I think in the boxing element, I think that's where Jackson shines. He has fantastic takedown defense, which he demonstrated when he won the title 2 years ago, which I did forget to mention, former PFL welterweight champion in 2023. He lost the belt to an undefeated Russian prospect, so not necessarily a bad opponent to lose to. And Jackson, the ass-kicking machine, man, I got to tell you, on the feet, I think he's able to walk down Andrea. I think his team's going to be looking to pressure here. I think he's going to be able to mix in the boxing and land the bigger shots. And to be honest with you, it's not that Andrea is a slouch on the feet. It's more that he needs that space to operate. He likes to keep it at kicking range and kick to the calf, kick to the head. He needs that ability in that range. And I just noticed that Jackson likes to pressure. And when I watched the PFL Origins, the promo that they had when they talked about Jackson going back to his hometown, they talked a lot about how Jackson was saying in his last fight, he was very angry. He was very emotional going into that fight. And he looked that way when he fought. He wasn't necessarily pressuring. He wasn't fighting. He wasn't necessarily himself in there. And he talked about getting back to what he loves and proving that, that not only was it not a fluke that he won the belt in 2023, but he says he feels rejuvenated. And I can believe him too, just purely based on the promo. I don't know if I'm looking too much into that, but I think Jackson gets it done here with his pressure. I think that they're going to be able to walk him down, smother the kicks of Andrea, and ultimately get the win. And I do think that Andrea is, without the kicks, without the grappling, which is not going to be there for Jackson, I don't think that his boxing is his strong suit. Jackson's the more athletic guy, the faster guy, and I think that's going to pay dividends for him on Thursday. And I'm picking the ass-kicking machine to kick some ass. So he's going to be the final pick in the breakdowns for the PFL World Tournament Round 1, the welterweights and the featherweights. And if you've enjoyed all of the content, like I always say, hit that like and subscribe button. I'm going to try and keep this going. We're going to keep all the PFL content over on the channel. Obviously, still doing our full UFC full card breakdown over at the Apex with Josh Emmett taking on Lerone Murphy this Saturday. And just make sure you guys know as well, the PFL is on a Thursday. It's a Thursday night. So don't get it confused. It is not on a Saturday. It's a Thursday. So 2 events coming up for you guys. Obviously on the channel, we like to talk all things MMA. I'm going to try and get as much content out for you. If you have enjoyed the content, hit that like and subscribe button and keep an eye out for tomorrow's video with the full card breakdown that I'm going to be doing with my man Carlos, aka El Pablo Chacon. Hit that like and subscribe button, people. Peace.